A warm welcome to all of you. Lovers of New York City who are gathered here today to honor and celebrate the life and work of John V. Lindsay here at one of his former residences, 155 East 72nd Street in Manhattan. I'm Barbaralee Diamonstein-Spielvogel, the chair of the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center and the New York City Landmarks 50 Alliance, a committee of 139 distinguished and dedicated individuals and organizations committed to informing the public about the past, present, and future of historic preservation in our city. Our thanks go to each and all of you for joining us here today, and to Simeon Bankoff, the Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council, the advocate for all of the 110 plus 20 extensions of historic districts throughout all of the 5 boroughs, and to the board and the board president, Ms. Daniel, and the management, Ms. Weiner, of 155 East 72th Street. John Lindsay attended St. Paul's School, and from what I gather, the Buckley School before that, in Concord, New Hampshire. Was graduated from Yale in 1943, and immediately afterwards, he entered the Naval Reserve and served as a gunnery officer during World War II, earning 5 battle stars and achieving the rank of senior lieutenant by the time he was discharged in 1946. He then received a law degree from Yale, was admitted to the New York State Bar, joined a law firm, and in 1949 he married Mary Ann Harrison. As a young Republican leader, he attracted the attention of the U.S. Attorney General, the much esteemed Herbert Brownell Jr., who invited him to serve in Washington, which he did from 1955 to 1956 as liaison between the Justice Department and the White House, where he helped draft what would become the Civil Rights Bill of 1967. When he returned to New York in 1958, he ran for Congress from this very district and was elected for 4 terms. He became known as one of the most liberal Republicans in the House, a reputation that stood him in very good stead when he eventually ran for mayor in 1965. In 1965, he was elected with support from a widely diverse base of liberal and reform voters, African Americans, Puerto Ricans, and became the first Republican to be elected mayor since 1945. That was a 20-year interval. His new administration was said to have brought efficiency and professional administration into government with a massive reorganization and consolidation of departments and agencies. But he faced a series of crippling strikes and poor relations with municipal unions, as well as controversy over his support of a decentralized school system and attempt to establish a civilian complaint review board. In this, as with many other initiatives, as you will no doubt hear from a number of people who have given many years of their lives to public service and improving the city we love. You will hear that he was a man way ahead of his time. The review board was not established in New York City until 1993. Known for his idealism, he is remembered by most New Yorkers for his walks through troubled neighborhoods, a calming, dignified presence that forestalled any violence in New York City while other urban centers burned. And now we will begin our program of distinguished speakers who are here to celebrate his life and work. We will begin with actually the man who is referred to as the keeper of the flame. Jay Kriegel, if you will please come forward. Now a senior advisor at related companies. Jay Kriegel was chief of staff. Sorry?
It's supposed to be last. Sum up everything.
I know you want to control everything, but not the program. Was chief of staff, special counsel to Mayor Lindsay, a former senior vice president of CBS. He was counselor to the financial communications firm. Do you think they think they're still in City Hall? Of Abernathy McGregor.
That's a senior person. They should have heard. No?
He's going last, thank you. And if you keep it up, you may not go at all. Isn't that the way we're supposed to deal with him? A warm welcome again. He counselor to the financial communications firm of Abernathy McGregor from 1997 to 2005. Most recently, he was the executive director of 2012. He spearheaded the New York City campaigns to host the Olympic Games. He serves on many boards, Prep for Prep, Wildcat Service Corporation, and many organizations. Thank you for joining us today, Jay. You may get the last word yet.
Never, never. Thank you, Barbaralee, for giving us this day to remember and reflect on John Lindsay. Regrettably, it seems to me, recent events in Ferguson, Missouri, and even this city have suddenly made his record of one of high relevance today. For unexpectedly and sadly, America's cities are once again dealing with our nation's deepest historic burden, the continuing legacies of race, and particularly the role of police in urban America, the use of force, especially deadly force, and the responsibility of an elected mayor. 45 years ago, we faced those same issues under the most extreme pressures in a period of unparalleled tension, fear, and political vitriol. Yet John Lindsay knew exactly what to do, and he did it consistently, daily, regardless of relentless attacks. In that long ago time of turmoil, when the nation was shocked by the terrifying images on television of cities aflame and armed forces occupying America's urban neighborhoods, this city was blessed to be led by a man of unequaled principle, clarity of vision, and unwavering personal courage. John was deeply impacted by his service in the war. Those years left him with a profound belief that public service is the highest calling. And it was here in this apartment in the decade of the 50s that his passion for service took root. So today we salute the gifts that John Lindsay gave to all of us and to this city. His determination to tear down long-established barriers that limited opportunities, especially for blacks and Hispanics. His commitment to open the halls of power to all, black and Hispanic, women and gay. His belief that government can and must aid the less fortunate among us. His embracing of the mayor's responsibility for the most sensitive acts of government, from the use of force to the treatment of the disadvantaged. And his abiding confidence that despite all our problems, this city would prevail and remain the center of our civilization and the wellspring of our most sacred values. It was the very clarity and precision of John's principles and actions that made him so controversial. Yes, he could be rigid and uncompromising, for he was a remarkably pure politician. but one never had doubt as to where he stood, especially on the most difficult and contentious issues of the day. That made him a glorious leader for those of us who shared his quest. He led us into battle fearlessly and passionately, and in those extraordinary days we followed his lead with optimism that together we could build a better city and enrich the lives of the downtrodden. And today, nearly half a century later, we remain proud and inspired to have joined in battles with him. So as we stand here on this gorgeous fall day, on this beautiful street, in this most compact, pressured, and compulsive of cities, let us also remember how he loved its urban fabric, the architecture of its buildings, which he celebrated, the majesty of its parks, which he made accessible, the power of its waterfront, which he urged us to rediscover. And we still cherish today, as Barbaralee said, that abiding image of him walking the streets in shirt sleeve, reaching out to those who hurt, asking them for patience and to keep the peace. A symbol of how rooted he was in these very streets and how directed he was in personally steering the city through those turbulent times. I know we all thank Barbaralee and the Historic Landmarks Preservation Center for ensuring that those who pass by this spot for years to come will recall his name and hopefully his rich legacy. So there.
Now you see why he went first. That appropriate and eloquent overview. Thank you, Jay. One of the 20 people on President Nixon's 1971 enemies list, considered by many a badge of honor, Sid Davidoff was administrative assistant to Mayor Lindsay for 7 years. Currently a senior partner in the law firm Davidoff, Kutcher, and Citron, a sometime thespian. He has been a Chubb Fellow at Yale University and a lecturer at NYU School of Law. Not surprisingly, he served on the Metropolitan New York Board of Governors for the United States Olympic Committee. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Barbaralee. So when I spoke to Jay, he said he had a couple of notes that he was speaking from. And then he told me that I'm only supposed to talk about the family and personal things. So that's what I'm going to do.
Take off your sunglasses.
Really? You have to do that?
Better looking. Oh, put them back on.
Okay. Gordon. I had the good fortune of being a student at the Brooks School when they called it then in 1958, when John Lindsay was running in the Republican primary for Congress. I was a kid from Queens, trying to get out faster, taking day and night courses, and he walked in and talked to our class, and at that time there was never going to be a separation between me and John Lindsay if I could make that happen. I became a volunteer, a stamp licker. In those days you had to lick stamps, an envelope, and send out his Christmas cards, and did whatever was necessary, because there was never a doubt in my mind that John Lindsay was going to be the important figure, at least in this city, if not in this country, and I just wanted to be part of that. Those years were... listen, I step aside for old people, not for babies. That's it. So it was during those years of 58 through 64, as we went into the mayoralty, that John Lindsay obviously lived here. A couple of us this morning were at a breakfast that the Mayor de Blasio hosted, and talked about Gracie Mansion in an answer to a question about how living at Gracie Mansion, how is it? And he said, Gracie Mansion is a hotel. It's not a home. My home is still in Brooklyn. Well, John Lindsay, because of Mary Lindsay, made Gracie Mansion a home. So this was their first home. Their second home was there, and I didn't want to leave out today how important Mary, because John Lindsay's plaque, but how important Mary Lindsay was to the family that lived here. She was the glue, the solder. She kept it together. When at Gracie Mansion when he finally went there. She kept us in our place. She made sure there was family time. She made sure that the dinners happened, and that the growing up of 4 kids that she had to oversee was very much partnered by John. So today my role here is to say thank you, Barbaralee, for making this the memorial that it is on behalf of John and Mary Lindsay. Thank you.
Gordon Davis is currently a partner in Venables Real Estate Group, but he served as special assistant to Mayor Lindsay until 1973, when he became a member of the New York City Planning Commission for the next 5 years. Then he was appointed by Mayor Koch to what was then called Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, where he served until 1983. A former partner at Dewey & LeBoeuf and a past president of Lincoln Center, Gordon Davis is a founder of the Central Park Conservancy and serves on numerous boards. In 2010, President Obama appointed him to the board of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the recipient of numerous honors and awards, as is every person on this program today, including the Distinguished Medal of the City of New York for exceptional service, Jazz at Lincoln Center's Ed Bradley Award for leadership, and the 100 Black Men Public Service Award. I think your next page is now disappearing.
Am I dead yet? Thank you.
You look alive and well to me.
Thank you very much.
And Gordon Davis.
It is early on in the Lindsay administration, one person in particular stood out to me, which was Jack Robertson, for his sartorial splendor, as much as anything else. And this is how far we come. He and Jay are wearing the same suit today. So I don't know what that tells you, but it's,
Not exactly.
you know, all of us have 1,000 stories about working with John Lindsay and working with the people here. When I thought about it, my story is pretty simple, which is I owe my entire career in New York to John Lindsay. Without any justification or any qualifications at all, he appointed me to be a member of the City Planning Commission on December 31, 1978. On the commission at the time were Sylvia Deutsch, Jerry Coleman, Marty Gallant, Jack Robertson, and Chester Rapkin and myself, and the chair was John Zuccotti. It was an extraordinary experience, and for that reason, for my service on the commission as much as anything else, I was asked by Ed Koch, who I did not know at all, to be the Parks Commissioner. I had never met him. I didn't know him. In fact, I had voted against him. I didn't tell him that in the interview, don't get me wrong. And at the time that happened, which was late 1977, he and John were not the best of friends, to put it mildly. They were exchanging quotes publicly about their disdain for each other, basically. There's a history to that which doesn't need to be repeated here. I just want to tell you my personal piece of that history, which is Ed Koch asked me to be the Parks Commissioner, and I said, can I get back to you tomorrow? And the first thing I did was call John Lindsay. And I said, Mr. Mayor, the mayor-elect has asked me to be Parks Commissioner, but I don't want to give him an answer until I talk to you and get your advice. And he said, that job is not about politics. It's more important than politics. You should take it. And I then called Ed Koch back and said, I will take the job. So that is one of the most, one of my most poignant memories about John, which is, as angry as he was at the time, he immediately put it aside. And for the entire time I was at the Parks Department, we'd have lunch about every 6 or 7 months, talk about the parks, talk about his feelings about the parks, and he continued to be, throughout that time, an inspiration. And so I'm deeply grateful, Barbaralee, for being here today. In fact, I'd never been to the East Side until I met John Lindsay. So with that, I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Jacqueline Robertson is a singular figure in the history of architecture and design in our country because of the numerous and significant roles he has played. But one that deserves wider attention is what happened during the Lindsay administration. I'm very admiring of your long tenure as the head of the School of Architecture at the venerated University of Virginia. But this role was groundbreaking in so many ways, and I hope you'll come forward and tell us about this singular initiative that Mayor Lindsay created and its genesis and how an urban design group occurred then. Unfortunately, not much since then, but maybe you'll say some words that will inspire someone to do so. Jacqueline Robertson.
This is a dangerous place to stand in my city. So much is going on. I better speak loudly. A number of things. I met John Lindsay for the first time. My family were great friends of his wife because she was a Virginian and we were. In fact, Mrs. Lindsay's mother was one of the most powerful women in the country. She was chairman of the Women's Garden Club of America, and if you want a power group, that's it. I met John personally when he was deciding whether he would run. And he was down in the Caribbean. I was recovering from an operation, and he was trying to figure out what the hell he was going to do. And he had going back and forth. I went bone fishing one day with him and caught the first bonefish I'd ever fished for on the first cast, which he couldn't believe. He said, God damn it, Robinson, what did you do to get that? I said, pure luck. He said, the other thing I want to tell you is if you decide to run, I will bring to work in the city some of the best young urban planners, urban designers, and architects, which this city has been missing for a long time. And he said, you're on. And when he decided to run, he called me up and said, okay, Jackie, get down here as soon as you can and make sure that those people that you're pointing out have some idea of what they're going to do. The story goes on. We met Don Elliott for the first time, who had become the head of the planning commission. Ed Loeb had been asked to do it, turned it down, gone to Boston. And it was a good group of people who I was with, a number of whom had been in New Haven at school with me. We were convinced that what had to happen in the city was for the planning commission or the development department to have a small group of professionals whose single purpose was the design of the city. Urban design, buildings, roads, parks, all of that. And that had been, long ago, under Robert Moses, a high, very high goal. And Moses, in his first years, was a genius. So we went with John Eliot and we ran up against the wall, which was, how do you get through civil service? And none of us knew how to do a civil service exam, and one of our colleagues, John Vliet, sat down and figured out and wrote something that he thought would work. More to the point, John Lindsay went to see Bill Paley. And he said, okay, let's use some power in this city. He asked Paley if he would head up a small group of businessmen, Walter Thayer, a whole series of major players at that time, and present something in 6 weeks in terms of a book. This shows you how smart Lindsay was. Paley was, in knowing Lindsay, and saying, it has to fit into a briefcase, so it can't be one of these big things and composed. 2, it has to be written in everyday English and well written. He went and hired a guy who wrote for one of the best architectural magazines, and it has to have a good cover. When you walk into a room, Lindsay said, people walk in, they look around, they see what's on the table, they go and pick it up and look at it. And John and Paley got along famously, and he said, but you got to have this for me in 6 weeks. And the Paley group worked on it for 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, we gave to John a report on the design of the city, which, when read by nearly everyone here, would be totally understandable, and to a man in the street. And the Paley report gave the key to create the urban design group. It was the first time in this city that there had been such a group. It was very small. The New York Times wrote letters of support both in the first administration and the second, saying the creation of an urban design group in this city at this time is Lindsay's biggest gift to the city, because no one thought about the design of the village as a political issue, and of course it is.
Can you tell about some of the controversies?
What?
Can you tell about some of the controversies?
Yeah, well, Barbaralee is saying some of the things that the group did. We created a series of detail offices in Lower Manhattan and Midtown that looked at all of the development projects that came in from a major development community, and took them and went to work on them so that they did things that were useful and that could be presented successfully to a lot of people, some of whom hated Lindsay. There was one project that I remember particularly because it was pretty serious. It's how you kept retail from leaving Fifth Avenue. And it was happening. All these stores were closing. And so Lindsay said, this is a real headache. Try to figure out a way that we can encourage more retail to stay in Midtown. And we wrote a piece of implementable language that made that a real plus for developers. most developers didn't like Lindsay very much, as many of you will remember. At the beginning, there was going to be a new high-rise building built over Grand Central Station. And it was incredibly ugly. It was being built by a British developer. Nearly all of us who were urbanists and who loved Grand Central Station hated the building that was built right on the spine. And here was going to be another one. And we went to this guy over here, where's Kriegel? We went and said, we're going to stop this, and it's going to be very simple. We're going to tell this guy, which we did. I went with the planning commissioner head to meet this guy, and he got up and showed what he was going to do, this English guy. And we said, this building will not be built. That doesn't happen. The mayor doesn't want this building to be built here, and it will not be built here, we guarantee it. I said, well, you can't do that. I own it, you know, blah, blah, blah. That was the beginning of the urban design group, and it did work all over the city. And the second time that he ran, it was, the Times said that this was his biggest contribution. The thing that moved me most was at Lindsay's funeral. Those of you who went to it, bagpipers came in first, and the cathedral was filled. And a number of people here gave talks. The most meaningful event for me was when a black politician stood up and said, will everyone here who worked for John Lindsay please stand up? Half of the people in the bloody city stood up. And he turned to Mary Lindsay and he said, you see, no one but your husband could have brought the quality of people to work for this city as he did. That's what makes him a great mayor. It was so stunning, and that it was a well-known black man speaking to Mrs. Lindsay and saying he had it because he attracted the best people, and he knew what that meant for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. The third woman elected to a citywide post in New York City history was Betsy Gottbaum, who was the New York City public advocate from 2002 to 2009. She served as district manager for the Chelsea-Clinton, Manhattan West neighborhood, assistant for women's issues, and assistant for education during the Lindsay administration. In 1990, Mayor David Dinkins appointed her the first woman commissioner of Parks and Recreation. In 1994, she was named president of the New York Historical Society, a job she held until launching her campaign for public advocate in 2001. A warm welcome, Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Barbaralee, for doing this. And I hate to disagree with Jackie, but I think that one of the most important things with all these wonderful people who came into this administration is that we really had fun. a lot of fun, a lot of laughter, a lot of fun, and John was right at the center of it. But I have to say that seeing a lot of my colleagues just makes me feel so warm inside, because we really did have a wonderful experience. Many of you I worked for here, and I can't quite believe I lasted. Anyway, the thing I remember the most about John, and Barbaralee said it, is that he was way ahead of his time. And as the education commissioner, boy, did I just give myself an advance, but as assistant to the mayor for education, he really believed in decentralization. And the problem was the city wasn't ready for it. And there was no way, there was no way we could have achieved it in any way. But look, today, we still haven't achieved it. And we still don't know how to involve parents in the education of their children. And it is amazing that this man tried so hard to do that. And as I said earlier, I can only say that he was an extraordinary example and so much fun, and I'll never forget those blue eyes. Thank you.
An extremely effective public policy practitioner, and surely one of the most soft-spoken, Richard Aurelio was campaign manager of Mayor Lindsay's successful re-election campaign in 1969, after which he was named deputy mayor of New York City. He's had a distinguished career of nearly 50 years in government, as a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and in communications. Dick Aurelio served in the Air Force during the Korean War, was then a news reporter and news editor of Newsday in the 1950s. He was a very influential and key assistant to the effective great representative of New York, United States Senator Jacob Javits. He's been a political consultant to several national public leaders and executive of 2 international public relations firms. He was also a former president of Time Warner, and for those of you who don't remember, he was the founder and president of New York One News. He retired from Time Warner in 1998, and he then joined Warner Communications. No, before that, he joined Warner Communications in 1979 as Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, and was the founding president of New York One News from 1992 until 1998. It is a genuine personal pleasure for me to introduce Richard Aurelio.
Thank you, Barbara. My job is to wrap this up, so it won't be long, folks. But you got to put up with an old Italian man's voice. But one of the things that as I looked at this scene, I can't get out of my mind. This is really a New York sidewalk happening that John Lindsay would love. I mean, so exciting and so cool, and it's great to be here. And I first want to say that sharing this platform with Barbaralee Diamonstein is kind of special for me, because we go back some 50 plus years when she was the secret weapon in LBJ's White House, and I was a character in Capitol Hill, and that was the days when in Washington they really accomplished something. They really passed, believe it or not, they passed legislation during those years. But anyway, it's nice to think about those times. And thank you, Barbaralee, for all you've done through the years to bring this wonderful landmark culture to the New York City landscape. It's also nice to see so many friendly faces here, which is a reminder about one of the truly amazing things about John Lindsay is that he attracted so many supporters, and the fact that long after he has left the scene, and some 5 decades since he was mayor, that there should be a turnout like this of supporters who believed in him and still believe in him and are here to support and protect his legacy is really a remarkable story in itself. But that's why we're here, and a tip of the hat to our legacy protector in chief, Jay Creedle, who has made that feeling of support and for John Lindsay important. But that's why we're here today, to mark this site where he and his family lived when he decided to embark on a political career. And it began right here in this apartment house when he challenged an incumbent congressman from this district. This district was known as the Silk Stocking District. If there's any history buffs in the area, I'm told that some history buffs claim that that label, Silk Stocking, originated with Teddy Roosevelt when he was the police commissioner in New York. But anyway, Lindsay was elected while he was living here to his first term, and he served 4 terms in Congress, elected by the voters in this district by increasing margins each time. He moved on from here eventually to Gracie Mansion as New York's 103rd mayor. And I must say, not just an ordinary mayor, but a mayor that was historically unique. He was elected as a Republican. He was re-elected on the liberal line alone. He served his first term as a registered Republican, and most of his second term as a registered Democrat. That alone makes him pretty special. But as the medallion points out when you see it, beyond all the accomplishments of the Lindsay years, the one that is most remembered is his leadership that kept New York calm when other cities were aflame with riots during the 1960s. Now, you know, this has been said very often, but it's not mere rhetoric. For example, when Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, there were riots in 125 cities with a toll of many dead and injured. And in many cities, there were fires, looting, the National Guard was called out, curfews were imposed, but not in New York. And a Newsweek magazine headline at that time summarized perfectly that situation. It said, "Why didn't New York burn?" The answer, John Lindsay. And it's not just because he walked the troubled streets, which he did, but it was also because of his relentless obsession for civil rights from his very first day in Congress and throughout his career. It was his strong belief, which he which he laid out to me in our very first policy discussion, that it was imperative that minorities be empowered, sitting at the governance table, shaping government policies. It was also Lindsay as vice chairman of the Kerner Commission, where he was the force behind that panel's historic warning about a racially polarized nation, advocating a blueprint for racial harmony that was way ahead of its time, that emphasized police restraint, community cooperation, and is perhaps the major reason why John Lindsay matters today. Amid so many similar issues which still resonates in the nation. For me, there's another reason, and I think for some other people too, and that is because he was one of the very first to connect costly wars with domestic issues. He was one of the earliest national figures to oppose the Vietnam War. He called it the most unwanted war in the country's history in a speech he made in Michigan in 1965. And I just want to remind you that was only 1 year after the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. In his fight for shifting national priorities from war to urgent urban issues, dominated not only his congressional career, but all his campaigns, his mayoral years, his brief presidential run, and was the principal way he judged political leaders right to the end of his life. So, as people walk by this, my hope is they will think about that very profound and powerful legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are several people here, all of you very important, but I think you'd like to know that there are some members of the Lindsay family, his sister-in-law, Mrs. Lindsay, his nephew, George Lindsay, and his daughter, Margaret Lindsay Peacott. Will you come forward, Margaret, and say a few words on behalf of the family?
I'm tall. This is tough. Thank you, Barbaralee. This.
Maybe if we lift the bottom.
There you go. I'm too
Why
tall.
don't we lift the bottom?
I'm not. Thank you. I'm not 6'4", but I want to thank all of you for coming, Barbaralee and the Historic Preservation Group for putting this together. But most importantly, on behalf of Mom and Dad, this meant a lot to them. I'm here for my family. I was the only one, unfortunately, was able to come, but I will tell you, this was home. A couple of you said to us, you know, when we walked in, we're in there, and they said, "Where'd you grow up?" I said, "I grew up right here." And I said, "This is my home." And I love this building. I've walked by it many, many times. I've snuck in a couple of times to see what changes they've made, and they're not many. It looks fabulous. As a matter of fact, the fellow over there lives in our old apartment, and I'm going to get a tour after this. So I haven't been in there in a long time, but another friend of mine is here, and her daughter lives in this building. So there's a lot of... It obviously brings people back over and over. 155 is a very special place for us. We grew up on the streets. We went to Central Park right here. I said to somebody earlier, I said there was a wonderful guy in those days. You had a hand-done elevator, and if Louis the doorman was on when we came home from school, we got to run the elevator up and down all day, all afternoon. We practiced landings, we did all sorts of stuff. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful building in a great neighborhood. As I said, I have many friends that are still here, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank the board of 155 for putting up this very special plaque. And thanks to 155, my home. Thank you.
lift this up a bit.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
There you go.
Since 2005, award-winning author and journalist Sam Roberts has been the New York Times Urban Affairs correspondent. He is also the host of the New York One weekly hour-long show called Close Up. Before joining the Times, he worked at the Daily News for 15 years, first as a reporter, then city editor, and as political editor. He too is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, particularly from the Society of the Silurians, the Newspaper Guild of New York, and the Peter Kiss Award from the Fund for the City of New York. During this last prolific year, he wrote about Grand Central, how a train station transformed America, and his most recent book, this handsome and enticing volume, A History of New York Through 101 Objects. But Sam knew John Lindsay, and he will tell you a bit about that history of New York.
Thank you, Barbaralee. I'm not going to tell much history because I know Sid has to get to lunch. But I want to thank Barbaralee for reminding us of how much history is important. New Yorkers don't think much of our history. It kind of reminds me of what one of the kids said in Alan Bennett's play, The History Boys. When he was asked to define history, he said more or less, it's just one damn thing after another. Well, 3 weeks after John Lindsay was elected mayor, Man of La Mancha opened downtown near Greenwich Village. And Mitch Lee, who was the composer of the show, told me this year before he died that the emotional appeal of The Impossible Dream was universal. Disaffected blacks, Puerto Ricans, feminists, gay rights advocates, anti-war protesters, each embraced that song as their personal anthem. And to many New Yorkers, John Lindsay embodied a dream too. Now maybe it was a mythology, and maybe half a century later, we're still trying to untangle that mythology. William F. Buckley called it flamboyant idealism, but it was a flamboyant idealism that I think a lot of us would be proud to embrace still today. We judge mayors, I think by three things: the challenges they inherit, the resources they muster to meet those challenges, and the legacy that they leave behind. I can promise you change and reform and progress Lindsay pledged when he became mayor, and I think we can all agree that he achieved at least 2 out of 3 of those. One legacy was that the city, as Dick Aurelio said, did not burn. And Dave Garth once said, if you want to get into the accusations about giving the city away, if he hadn't done what he did, there wouldn't have been a city to give away. He also, as several speakers pointed out, beguiled a cadre of talented and committed public servants to enter government, some of whom are here today. Tom Morgan called them the unrepentant, and for the most part, the unindicted, and mostly the unappreciated. Years later, at one reunion, someone yelled to John Lindsay, "You still look fresh, Mr. Mayor." "Not true," Lindsay replied. "We're tired, and everyone else is dead." Look around you today. Not everyone else is dead, and the dream is still alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And the dream is still alive. we have a representative here of the very effective, committed, dedicated, 24/7 Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer. Thank you for coming, Joe Garba, the Deputy Borough President of Manhattan. I think it gives you an idea how important New York's history is to that office. Thank you again, and please thank the Borough President for all that she does and continues to do. Cultural medallions are porcelainized enamel plaques affixed to the exteriors of buildings throughout New York City to commemorate an individual or an occurrence that has made a significant contribution to New York City's rich cultural heritage and to create a sense of pride in our history. Most of these people or events are nominated by members of the public, and if you know of someone in a still existing building, no phantom parking spaces, please, and verifiable evidence that they did live there, we would be very interested to know. To learn more about our programs, please see HLPC culturalmedallions.org. It is a pleasure to dedicate this cultural medallion to the accomplishments of John Lindsay. And now, Simeon Bankoff, the Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council, will unveil and read the text of the medallion.
John Vliet Lindsay, November 24th, 1921 to December 19th, 2000, 55 East 72nd Street, Manhattan. The leadership of John V. Lindsay, 103rd Mayor of New York City, 1966 to 1973, kept the city calm during a time of social unrest when other cities were beset with riots by walking through troubled streets, adopting a policy of police restraint, and opening government power to minorities. Known as America's Mayor, his many urban innovations included closing parks to traffic, incentive zoning, and air conditioning subways. Elected as a Republican and re-elected as a liberal, he ran unsuccessfully for president in 1972. A naval officer in World War II who saw action in the Pacific, Lindsay was elected from the 17th District to 4 terms in Congress, 1958 through 1965, where he was a leader in civil rights and liberties and an early opponent of the Vietnam War. He, his wife Mary, and their 4 children lived here from 1955 to 1962.